A very good morning to all of you, distinguished dignitaries, excellencies, and the august audience. It is indeed a great pleasure to welcome you all to the second G20 Energy Transitions Working Group meeting to promote adoption of energy efficiency and sustainable practices. It is truly a pleasure and honor for us to welcome you all to Gandhinagar. I hope you have time enough to enjoy the beauties of this splendid city. As the world is warming at an alarming pace, cooling has become an utmost necessity, a basic human right. The past 9 years have been among the top 10 warmest on record. As the IPCC report discloses, human-induced climate change has resulted in extreme heat-related deaths and illnesses globally. While mortality rates increase during heat waves, high temperatures also disrupt labor productivity, causing additional economic losses. In many parts of the world, especially the global south, access to cooling is not a luxury at all, but a necessity to mitigate the health impacts of extreme heat and keep food safe, medicines viable, and workforces productive. As the demand for cooling in buildings increases, so does the associated greenhouse gas emissions. Unless we take action to improve efficiency and switch to more climate-friendly refrigerants. Typical air conditioners and refrigerators use a lot of energy, and the refrigerants they contain, the HFCs, are potent greenhouse gases. Energy consumption for cooling is estimated to rise steeply under business as usual scenarios, with more than 5.6 billion ACs projected to be installed by 2050, which amounts to 10 new ACs sold every second for the next 30 years. The side event enabling a global transition to sustainable cooling is being convened by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency under the guidance of Ministry of Power of the Government of India in partnership with the United Arab Emirates, the UAE COP28 Presidency, and the United Nations Environment Programme led Cool Coalition, designed to seek feedback and participants' perspectives on a global cooling action. The deliberations will highlight the country and organizations' actions on sustainable cooling and, in particular, the lessons and experiences that India has championed as a global leader in its transition to sustainable cooling, as well as emphasize how G20 and COP28 processes can amplify these and enhance global collaborations. Let us begin this meeting by inviting our distinguished dignitaries on stage. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Abhay Bakre, Director General, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Ministry of Power, Government of India. Mr. Saud Al Nouri, Head of Diplomatic Engagement, Office of the UAE Special Envoy for Climate Change. Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance. Mrs. Gauri Singh, Deputy Director General, IRENA. Mr. Alok Kumar, Secretary, Ministry of Power, Government of India. And Ms. Lily Riahi, Global Coordinator of Cool Coalition, UNEP. We are honored to have you all dignitaries on stage with us. It is truly a pleasure and honor for me to invite now Mr. Abhay Bakre, Director General, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Ministry of Power, Government of India, to deliver welcome remarks.
Thank you, ma'am. Respected Shri Alok Kumar, ETWG Chair and Secretary Ministry of Power, Government of India, Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General ISA, Ma'am Goring Singh, DDG IRENA, Mr. Saeed Al Nouri, Special Envoy UAE, Lily Rai from UNEP Cool Coalition, other officials from ETWG member countries, invited countries, international organizations, UNEP, AEEE, Bureau, Cool Coalition, and all the delegates and participants who have joined virtually in this event. A very good morning to you all. Let me first thank COP28 Presidency, UNEP Cool Coalition, and all other colleagues for organizing this side event on the track of second ETWG G20 working group meeting here. The objective of this particular side event is basically to take cooling as a sectoral approach and bringing it to a main stage for our overall energy transition plans. And that's why we have organized this side event as part of the second ETWG working group meeting. When we talk about energy transition, we have different approaches. We have different sectors to address. We have different technologies. We have different roadmaps, whether it's a short term, medium term, or long term. But in all these spheres, we talk mostly on a sectoral basis, whether it's industry, buildings, transport, appliances like that. But when we find the growth in a particular sector, we talk about hard to abate sectors like iron and steel, cement, aviation, transport. We try to address the challenges, we try to think about the new technologies. But if we see cooling as a cross-sectoral phenomena, we find the growth is phenomenal. And not only that in the coming 2-3 decades, especially in the developing economies, as well as on the developed countries, talking about the cooling as well as heating, we find it is a completely different approach that we need to adopt. And if we really see that kind of growth happening and also projected, due to various reasons, because of so many built environment coming up, they are all going to be air conditioned, and also when it's winter, it will be heated centrally. There will be huge aspirations coming up in the different populations, in different societies, civilizations, which will put a very huge demand on the air conditioners for their homes, for their other social institutions, whether it's colleges, universities, restaurants, hospitals, or even hotels. All this is put together if we find that cooling perhaps will be the highest, putting the highest demand in the next 2 decades. And in fact, we find that maybe by 2040 or beyond, up to 28 to 30% of emissions will be expected from cooling sector alone. If you put together everything, whether it's a cold chain or even transport or even the commercial and the residential building. So there is a need that when we talk about energy transition, we cannot ignore cooling as a sector. So if we try to find cooling alone as a complete sector, then we can perhaps address this issue or this challenge of high growth and the possible high levels of emissions in a much more effective manner. And that's why today's discussion is actually oriented, how do we really talk about sustainable cooling? After Kigali Amendment, different countries have come out with their action plans. India also one of the first country to come out with the India Cooling Action Plan, which is quite an impressive document covering the cooling aspect in different sectors, right from transport, buildings and agriculture, cold chain, etc. But the numbers which we have projected in next 2 decades are really alarming. We are expecting about 8 to 10 folds increase in the space cooling requirement, and that will be putting a huge burden on the power demand. If we can't address that kind of growth, then we will have to meet that much additional power capacity, which will be 3 times from what we are using now. Currently, about 120 billion units we are consuming on cooling side, but that will be something around 450 to 500 billion units by 2035 or 37. That will require not only the additional generation capacity, but equally important, the transmission capacity, the distribution capacity, and all kinds of other switch gears and control systems. One more issue is that mostly the cooling is also leading to the peak demand. So that means whatever cooling requirement is being added, in India it is projected it will go from current levels of about 100 to 120 million TR to up to 900 to 950 million TRs in next 15 to 20 years. In most of the cases when it is defining the peak demand, so that means the peak load or the peak power demand will also get affected, and that will be enhanced by that much ratio. So the best possible approach is to actually talk about the sustainable cooling. Try to get the most efficient cooling systems. Try to go for the most advanced technologies which can offer reduced load, both in terms of active as well as in a passive manner. And we will also need to educate the consumers, the users, the occupants of different buildings and institutions to actually have their behavioral change. In India, we have given and also promoted the use of the setting temperature between 24 to 25 degrees. And that has really worked. It is giving a lot of overall savings in terms of energy utilization. So this kind of behavioral change will also benefit. We can have passive cooling, something like building designs through conservation code like that. So there are different policies available. In India, we are going through effective implementation of India Cooling Action Plan. But I am sure this is one area where international cooperation is going to be very valuable and meaningful. And that's why for today's discussion, we will actually look forward from different countries, their experts and delegates. How do we really collaborate internationally to make sure that cooling demand, which is going to rise very high, how can we convert this into a sustainable cooling and make sure our energy transition approach is optimized without compromising the cooling aspirations of the consumers and the people, but how can we actually optimize the demand and address the energy transition as a final objective. Once again, BE is thankful for UNEP and all the partners here for organizing this side event. I look forward for a very fruitful discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your enlightening welcome address and highlighting the importance of sustainable cooling. I now invite Mr. Saud Al Nouri, Head of Diplomatic Engagement, Office of the UAE, Special Envoy for Climate Change, as we cast the spotlight on cooling and the Global Cooling Pledge.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Habib Bakri and Mr. Alok Kumar and all distinguished colleagues on the panel with me. It's truly a pleasure and honor to be with you here today. I wanted to extend a special thanks to the Indian presidency of the G20 as well. And I'm also very thankful for India and the Cool Coalition for their leadership on the topic of cooling and helping us connect the G20, COP28, and the Clean Energy Ministerial and Mission Innovation processes. If you have ever been to our region in the part during the summer, which honestly I don't recommend that you do, I would think twice. But I'm joking. Please do come visit whenever you can. You would immediately notice that cooling is an existential issue. We are in a part of the world that has cooling demand 365 days of the year, and our region is warming at a pace that's twice the global rate. We know for years that cooling is not just a mitigation issue, and not only an adaptation matter as well, but a matter of climate justice, with heat disappropriately impacting lower income and families. We have heard during our COP28 consultations is that we are not alone on this. An incredibly diverse range of actors have raised cooling as one of their top climate concerns, from humanitarian agencies to mayors, food producers, vaccine distributors, and even children advocates. They have all raised cooling as an existential and important issue that they are facing with their days. Heat has rapidly risen up the global agenda as a climate impact that was rarely featured in the COP process. Everyone also acknowledges that we cannot allow this vicious cycle to worsen, with cooling demand resulting in even more emissions and therefore more heat. Therefore, we would like COP28 to be a cool COP in all senses of the word. Today, I'm pleased that we can present the concept of the Global Cooling Pledge and discuss its parameters and potential next steps. We know that not every country, city, company, or entity has the same conditions or needs, but we learned from our consultations that there are many commonalities, and this is where we should put our efforts and focus on, working together towards a collective goal. This means working with the Cool Coalition, India, and other partners, and therefore hoping to collectively create a menu of options so that all of us can identify the actions that are relevant for our own situations. In doing so, we can deliver a significant collective response to the cooling challenge. The Cool Coalition has started to compile these options, ranging from nature-based solutions to appliance efficiency policy to innovation investments. Today, we would like to keep building consensus on such options. As you heard from our colleagues, or you will also hear from our colleagues, our hope is to intensify consultations in the upcoming months and launch the Global Cooling Pledge at the back-to-back meetings of the G20 energy ministers and CEM-MI in Goa this July. We would enter a kind of campaign season for the next 5 months to COP28. With your help, we hope to make sustainable cooling a strategic investment for the economy, the most vulnerable, the climate, and also the cool thing to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your address on the importance of sustainable cooling actions, highlighting how the G20 and COP28 processes can amplify these actions and strengthen global collaborations. I now request Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance, for his valuable address.
Shri Alok Kumar, Shri Alnoor, Mrs. Gauri Singh, Lily, Abhay, and friends. It's extremely timely that we are looking at the issue of sustainable cooling. And I think the transition to sustainable cooling is the key issue as far as the global community is concerned. And I'm delighted that the COP presidency is taking this up as a key issue. What we have seen in the past few years is that there is a continuum in terms of people's incomes and needs. Cooling is a necessity. As Mr. Alnoor mentioned, it is an existential issue for large parts of the globe. Either, for cooling is certainly true as far as the tropics is concerned, and warming becomes important as we go to the upper latitudes. It also came as a bit of a surprise when recently it was worked out that the global cooling demand is far greater than the global warming demand. In a sense, This is to be expected because the number of people in the tropics are far more. The temperatures, the temperature difference between the ambient and what is comfortable for us is far more in the tropics, and when multiplied by the number of people, it becomes a much larger factor. So this is important. I think that is taken for granted. Now, what do we do as a global society? What I'd like to do is to first recall that as far as India is concerned, we in India introduced for air conditioners, we introduced the labeling program. So have we for fans. Evaporative coolers, fans, and air conditioners are part of the continuum of technologies that need to be addressed for cooling. What do we do? The first is that I think countries need, and through the international processes, enabling countries to establish institutions which can, number one, identify the seasonal energy efficiency ratios would be important. Seasons are important because in every country, the kinds of temperatures that you see are somewhat different. And the kinds of devices that you have, whether it is fans or whether it is air conditioners or whether it is evaporative coolers, will have different kinds of efficiencies for different temperatures. Capturing them becomes important. That's the first thing that can be done. The second thing that can be done is to look at how do you integrate these into the building envelope. The Bureau of Energy Efficiency had introduced the Energy Conservation Building Code, which has recently been updated. Integrating cooling into the Energy Conservation Building Code, into the building codes, is important. And consequently, the institutions like BEE can help in making this connection happen. Let me give you an example. I think it is very important to note that as people's incomes increase, they move from fans to air coolers to air conditioners. Many a times while living in the same house. This makes it important that we enable ventilation. Unfortunately, the urban design process has not yet brought in ventilation to as detailed a need as there is. It is mentioned, but if I ask an architect what are the kinds of rules that you will do, there's often a blank. So we draw on, in a sense, mother's recipes, that you do it in that the windows, opposite windows are open so that air flows through them, right? Now the same house through which you design for air flowing, after a few years will have air conditioners. What do? It is important, therefore, that windows are made so that they are energy efficient. This means that we have windows that are that allow ventilation but are also fully sealable when needed. So therefore, insulated windows which are sealable become important. In India, there was the creation of the Glazing Society of India, which looked at windows, but I think these kinds of associations need to be built up so that windows are not built separately for every building, but are, in a sense, mass produced. That's the only way to bring down the cost of these kinds of insulated windows. The other area in which sustainable cooling becomes important is for agricultural cold chains. We see that in large parts of the world, the issue of the availability of the non-availability of cooling means that a large number of crops, either there is a very high wastage or they are not grown, because electricity supply for cold storages, particularly in rural areas, is either not there or is unreliable. Thankfully, because of the declining prices of solar energy, it has now been possible to have solar powered cold storages, energy efficient cold storages, which combine solar with some kind of storage. One of the things which we have found, which is of great interest in countries, is a solar cold storage in which solar is used during the day, and it cools and chills and sometimes freezes water for use at night. So all the 24 hours you have the kinds of temperatures that you need, which is essentially 2 degrees to 8 degrees, which is needed in a solar cold storage, and therefore reduces the kind of food wastage that would otherwise occur. And farmers have higher incomes because they can go to market as and when they get the prices that they need. The point that I would like to leave is whether it is the seasonal energy efficiency ratios, or whether it is windows, or whether it is solar cold storages, countries need institutional systems to enable this cooling to happen. Through the creation of the cooling pledge and through the international attention on sustainable cooling, I hope that we can move towards institutionalizing this cooling as we go along. I want to thank BEE, UNEP, the COP presidency, and of course the Government of India for enabling this attention on sustainable cooling, and look forward to a future in which all of us would be able not only to get sustainable cooling, but also contribute towards making it happen. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, sir, for such practical and meaningful insights on India's journey to sustainable cooling, the learnings and lessons on global leadership on cooling. I now request Mrs. Gauri Singh, Deputy Director General, IRENA, for her dynamic address on sustainable cooling.
Good morning. Secretary Par Shri Alok Kumar ji, Mr. Noor, Mr. Ajay Mathur, Mr. Bhakre, Lily Rai, all the distinguished guests. It's really a pleasure to be here for this side event, because I was just telling Mr. Mathur that somehow, I've been in so many discussions on energy transition, but this is really the first time I'm actually I'm in a event that focuses on cooling, which for me, growing up in Rajasthan, I really understand how important cooling is. And we heard Mr. Saud talk about that for many countries, it's really very existential. It's not a luxury. It's not just about thermal comfort, but it's about also being able to function productively in your day-to-day lives. And I'm really reminded about what one had heard from the Singapore Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan. He was asked what was it that really, which invention really helped Singapore move to where it is economically, and he said that it's air conditioning. And when we are talking about cooling, and for a country like India, it's also very aspirational. As the work has happened in India for providing access of electricity to every household, and as the economy grows stronger, cooling will become something that most of the households will aspire for, and will create that spike in demand that I think we very much saw last year happen. And this is something that we will see in many other developing countries also as their economies grow stronger. I think for IRENA to be part of this discussion, I think it's extremely valuable, because sustainable cooling, whether it's getting the cooling from the grid, and how the grid gets powered, and hopefully it'll get more and more powered by renewable energy as we move along with the higher electrification that we will see in the economies, but also off-grid solutions become extremely important. And Mr. Ajay Mathur was talking about the agriculture value chain and the very, very important aspect of how cooling in the agriculture value chain can actually bring much more income to the farmers. And this is something that we've seen in our work on in countries in Africa, where this is clearly a big demand that's emerging, along with the other demands on the access to electricity. So, as I said, this seems to be something that we haven't talked about enough. So I'm really glad that the G20 presidency has taken to amplify this message, and moving onwards to the COP presidency at UAE, this will become a very important issue for the international cooperation to come together and hopefully sign the cooling pledge. I also think that it's a lot about behavior change as well, because you do need to bring in the aspect of how regulations and guidelines can actually move the population to behave in a particular way, whether it's regarding the air conditioning, and we also heard about that. And an example is, some of us, would have seen in Japan, they've actually moved away from the very, whenever we had delegation from Japan, they used to come very formally dressed. And then they took a decision that we will wear clothes that are more appropriate for ambient temperatures, which are more in the range of 24, 25 degrees, rather than having, freezing offices of 18 degrees or 16 degrees that get you to wear jackets. So these are the kind of changes that, if they're taken at an international level, with international cooperation and catalyzing behavior changes, they can really have a huge impact. So I just want to end by saying that this is definitely a sector that's going to see a huge increase in demand for electricity. It's very important that the demand that goes up is not met by increase in usage of fossil fuels, and it can be done sustainably, and it can be managed. So I think all those elements need to be thought about, and as a sectoral approach, I think it's extremely important to have this on top of the agenda, especially for the tropical countries. And I'm so glad that it's now finding that kind of attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, dear ma'am, for your wise words of wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, join me now in welcoming Mr. Alok Kumar, Secretary, Ministry of Power, Government of India, for his thoughtful address.
Good morning, all my fellow co-panelists on the dais. I'm very happy to be speaking at this side event. And let me start with congratulating Bureau of Energy Efficiency for organizing this side event on this very important topic in association with UNEP, the Cool Coalition, and also the COP28 presidency, Saudi Arabia, UAE. A lot of things have been spoken about the importance of cooling and data and growth and everything. I see that the statistics which has been shared this morning with us about the demand it's going to create for energy in the coming years is going to be a key challenge for meeting our pledges for the carbon neutrality by 50 or 60 or 70. Because if I have heard you correctly, that if it is going to require around, say, 1/4 or 30% of energy requirement and emissions, that means it will be not possible to meet our targets and goals, to achieve our goals, unless until we handle this challenge of the cooling demand. I also see it as a big opportunity because when we were working out the action plan for the pledge we have taken for reducing our emissions by 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide per annum by 2030, not per annum, by 2030, we realize that a lot of efforts are required in various sectors, subsectors. You have to work around various technologies. So the work required is huge and the gains are sometimes very nominal, small when you draw the metrics. But I see that cooling demand is a big opportunity because it's only one set of technology. If we handle that technology efficiently and effectively, the gains are huge. So we need to pay more attention to this area of, say, the sustainable cooling. And it's a big opportunity for the whole global community. And that's why the G20 presidency of India has paid this attention and we are organizing this side event. There are two views have come from my previous speakers. Cooling need on one extreme is the existential and other is the aspirational. I see it in between somewhere. We have been existing and unless until it's a very extreme heat, we can still survive with some precautions remaining inside door and maybe with coolers or even fan. And other is the aspirational of course, the one which requires everybody, when your income increases, first thing you want to buy an AC or a car because that is the status symbol and also comfort. I see it's a more of a developmental need because there are some countries were developed, some large number of countries are developing. And if you see the segments, in offices, it increases productivity. Everybody knows those. It's a part of development. In terms of our food management in homes, it's also productivity. When the lady of the house starts working, she's not available for cooking every meal fresh in the house. So you cook your meal and then you need to store it so that it is available for number of times, number of days. So you have to keep it in a refrigerator. You buy fridge. For again development, for making our healthcare systems robust, and we need this cold chain for our vaccines and medicines. And of course, for having a proper rest and proper energy, to need, say, cooling when you rest in the home in the end of the day, during the night. So I see it as a developmental need, and we have to approach it that way. Because sometimes you are talking of some pledge. I think there is a proposal. We will definitely look at it and we will give our comments. But it brings the whole climate change negotiations that how do you see cooling? Say if you see the cooling demand side or the supply side or the efficiency side. I see the demand side of cooling, the growth in the cooling should be taken in a positive way because it's a developmental need. We should not see that, okay, so many of developing countries will need so much of cooling, it's a threat. No, because it's their right to develop. And that is what this Paris Agreement also said, this is the common but differentiated responsibilities. So when we talk of cooling, let us not attack too much on the growing demand. It will grow, but we have to talk about how to meet it efficiently. That is the approach we need. So that's why I say when we talk of the cooling pledge, let us not have a separate targets or separate thing because every country has factored into its NDCs. Like India has declared its upgraded NDCs in COP26. There is a target for an reduction of emission intensity by 45% by 2030 as compared to 2005 levels. It already factors into the all efficiency work we have to do in cooling. Now the gathering here, the team like this, and we should talk of how to achieve those targets rather than talking of separate targets or having so much of concern, too much concern about the demand. That will grow. It's a developmental process. I see it that way. Now, India has taken several actions in area of cooling, efficient cooling. As spoken, we have already a plan in place, the integrated cooling action plan. I'm told India is one of the first countries to come out with this plan in across sectors. We have a very robust star labeling program, and let me also make it very clear, the air conditioner is in a compulsory category when you do labeling. It is not a voluntary labeling, it's a standard. Nobody can manufacture an air conditioner in India without meeting those efficiency levels. So it's quite robust. Our government has declared that whatever we procure has to be minimum 3-star rated air conditioner. And Gauri Singh ji was talking about this behavioral change. India has already implemented this 24 degrees is the default setting. There is a demand which I think Bureau will that to raise it maybe to 25, because those are small things which can really control your energy consumptions. There are two things which have not been spoken, and they have been I've been thinking over it. I would like to mention it here for your consideration. The energy pricing is one which will impact a lot of your cooling demand, which I think we are all talking of technology, the growth and demand and peaking demand. In several countries, the energy prices are not cost reflective. If you see the problems being faced in several countries in Asia, South Asia, governments are slow, they don't keep the energy prices cost reflective. I'm telling you, whatever you may do, pledges and your efficiency, your technology, the key to the controlling the cooling demand will be your keeping your energy prices cost reflective. There will be poor people because in every society. So we need to promote and talk more about the better targeting of subsidies. Nobody is saying that you raise the prices for the poor people. But giving subsidy to a household which is using air conditioner, I think that is sheer cheap politics, and I think sheer negligence. Then you ultimately end up out of say disruptions, pressure on your budgets, and all your economic collapse and all. So as a group, we should talk more about the cost reflective energy pricing. Second similar thing is because I am power secretary, this is not the top of mind, the time of day tariff. Say when you do pricing, also do the time of day tariff so that you can manage your demand better. Otherwise, it will avoid lot of peaking capacities to be built in, and those peaking capacities are not easy to build. They get into locking into such assets which are either coal based or gas based and all. So TOD tariffs are very, very important for pushing industries to flatten out their demand, to shift their demand, which can save a lot of peaking system load on power supply, energy supply and all. So those were the few things I wanted to share this morning with you, and this is a good opportunity because at least in India, most of the building stock is yet to be built. Most of the air conditioners are yet to be manufactured. So this is a very right time and good opportunity that we talk about the best possible efficiency and bringing down the cost. So we have to work for both, making the efficient air conditioners cheaper and keeping the energy prices cost effective and realistic for the consumers, and also behavioral change. Our Prime Minister has given a call for the life mission, the lifestyle for environment. Very small example. You don't need to run your AC for whole of the 8 hours you sleep. Except some very extreme days, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 days in a year, you can do with maybe 2 hours of air conditioner, then you give a break, then you run. So if you talk more about it and about the consciousness, awareness about your environmental impact on the cooling, then things will fall in place. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such wonderful practical words as you opined sustainable cooling as a multi-purpose tool, highlighting the lessons learned and the need for global leadership in cooling from an Indian perspective. And I, for one, promise that I'll fix my AC at 26 now on. We are grateful to each one of you, distinguished speakers, for your words of enlightenment. And now, I request the very charming Ms. Lily Riahi, Global Coordinator of Cool Coalition, UNEP, to convey the vote of thanks.
Distinguished guests and delegates, we got some very important messages today from our eminent leaders and experts on how we can actually scale action on sustainable cooling without undermining the energy transition and creating greater access for those who need it. I'd like to take this moment to thank our distinguished guests, starting with Shri Alok Kumar, Secretary of Ministry of Power, for sharing for giving us this opportunity to speak about sustainable cooling in the context of the G20, and for your insight on how we can actually take international collaboration forward on cooling. We very much look forward to taking the key points we've raised on the pledge, on also the importance of looking at this from a demand efficiency perspective, and also incorporating costs into the deliberations on collective action on cooling. I think we have a golden opportunity this year with India as a global champion of cooling, as we've highlighted, with many of the policies already being taken forward, and as the host of G20, to build worldwide momentum around the messages you've raised today towards COP28. I'd also like to thank Ms. Gauri Singh, Deputy Director General of IRENA, for her remarks today. I think we really understood that no one actor is going to be able to take action on cooling alone. It's really going to have to be a multi-sector, multi-ministry approach, as you highlighted, behavioral change, cold agricultural sector, and also looking at, of course, renewable energy. So thank you for your remarks. I'd like to then also thank Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General of the International Solar Alliance, for your remarks. I think it was very important to hear that cooling demand is now greater than global heating demand. I think that was a very important point. And to hear about the journey that India has taken in really connecting, looking more at connecting cooling into building codes, passive building design, urban design, and also the importance of bringing solar into the agricultural cold chain. Thank you for that. Mr. Suad Al-Nouri, Head of Diplomatic Engagement of the UAE Special Envoy for Climate Change. We're very much looking forward to working with you to make COP28 a cool COP, and we thank you so much for taking this leadership and raising cooling on the global political agenda. And last but not least, thank you so much, wholeheartedly, Mr. Abu Bakr, for your leadership, for putting this event on the agenda, and for really highlighting to us that cooling is key to the energy transition and to the achievement of a resilient and clean power grid. So we're really grateful to you. And of course, thank you to all of the participants here today for joining us. We look forward to taking forward the inputs that we heard in the opening in the deliberations in the two roundtables today. So thank you very much. With that, we'd like to close the session.
Welcome back after the tea break. As we proceed to the roundtable discussion on the Global Cooling Pledge and road to COP28. The following session will be kick-started with a few framing remarks with the G20 and invited countries on how to raise ambition for sustainable cooling. This session will most likely conclude by 11:45 a.m., after which we will have a second round table showcasing India's leadership on cooling with CSOs and industry. I now call upon Mr. Rehma Al-Shamsi, Senior Specialist, COP28, UAE Presidency, to the podium and deliver his presentation. Sir.
Thank you. I'd like to begin by thanking the Indian presidency of the G20 for hosting this event. I'd like to thank our esteemed panelists that were on earlier the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, the Ministry of Power, the International Solar Alliance, IRENA, and of course, UNEP. So we'd like to share this presentation now with the room in terms of the global cooling pledge that the COP28 presidency, UNEP, and the government of India are working on. So to give a little bit of a background, we'd first like to highlight the cooling sector within the world. So as was mentioned by the panelists previously, cooling is not simply a luxury for thermal comfort. It's a necessity in places around the world, such as India, such as the UAE, where we're from, where we essentially need cooling, as my colleague mentioned, 365 days of the year to be able to function as an economy and as a society in general. It saves lives, but it is also it has a huge effect on the energy sector. In the UAE in particular, for example, about 70 to 80% of building energy demand comes from cooling itself. And globally, it accounts for about a fifth of electricity in buildings. And with the increasing of global ambient temperatures, we only know that this demand will increase. Now, fortunately, there are solutions at our fingertips, as has been mentioned again by many of our esteemed panelists. There are many ways to address this, whether it's looking at different forms of cooling, whether it's looking at more advanced appliances, whether it's looking at behavioral change, as was mentioned by Irina, or by insulation. Now, the Cool Coalition is the COP28 UAE's partner that's helping us lead the effort towards the global cooling pledge. The Cool Coalition was formed out of the UN Climate Action Summit in New York in 2019, and it's made up of several entities, including country governments, civil society organizations, private sector, as well as some city governments. Now, the outcomes that we're looking to achieve on cooling as part of the COP28 outcomes happening at the end of November, early December this year will be to ensure that cooling plays a very major role within climate discussions, including in the global climate stocktake that COP28 presidency will be undertaking this year, to understand where we are in relation to the Paris agreements of keeping 1.5 alive. We're looking to receive commitments on concrete actions towards cooling. Now that's whether through this pledge or whether it's through announcements as well. And we're also looking at having a high-level moment during the summit itself, which will be a cooling leadership segment that will be ministerial presence and non-state leaders as well. And as you can see here, we have the buy-in of leadership at the highest levels for this line of work, and we hope to be getting that for other partner countries and organizations as well moving forward throughout the year. Now, for the content of the pledge itself, it's a little long to go through right now in this room, but we will be sure to send out the draft pledge to anyone that would like to see it. In general, what we're looking to address is developing a menu of options for countries to be able to commit to accelerated action towards cooling. Some examples that are listed here are ensuring increased access to cooling, while at the same time ensuring we are reducing the emissions of cooling. We'll be looking at supporting existing initiatives and measures towards cooling. We'll be looking at establishing and enhancing efforts towards minimum energy performance standards, as well as working towards disseminating and improving the global best available technology to be used in a race to the top, essentially. We'll be looking at buildings in their relation to cooling. I think our colleague at the International Solar Alliance was mentioning the importance of insulation when we're talking about cooling. And again, here we have several other points that we've been developing throughout consultations similar to this one. throughout the year, and we're hoping to continue doing that with partners such as yourselves. Again, we'll be looking at addressing the share of renewable energy in relation to cooling. The net zero cooling report developed by the Cool Coalition and other partners has shown that if we invest now in sustainable cooling, we can essentially avoid $3.5 trillion in investments for renewable energy between now and 2050. That's a huge number, and it really shows the importance of the subject that we're discussing today. And again, we'll be looking at several different ways to address this, whether it's looking at coolants with lower global warming potential, whether it's looking at nature-based solutions, etc. And again, we also want to highlight that we're not only talking about cooling in terms of domestic cooling. Cooling also has implications and effects on other sectors, such as the food sector, the health sector. When we're talking about cold chain, I think the latest numbers have shown that the amount of food lost due to insufficient cooling would be enough to feed the world's hungry. So that's about 1 billion people that can be fed just by avoiding food wastage due to insufficient cooling. So in essence, again, there's a lot of these points. I'll let you read them yourselves through the slide, but again, we'll be sending out this draft and we'll be hoping to get feedback as much as we can from everybody throughout the year in order to have something prepared by July. Now, again, as I mentioned, we're looking at conducting a lot of these consultations. Here are some photos of previous examples. I'm sure there are some people you could recognize in these photos. We have Ms. Singh from IRENA as well in a previous session. Yeah. So this is essentially our roadmap. As you can see, we've already conducted quite a few of the consultations. Sorry. So we are currently here at Gandhinagar, 2nd of April. So we've already conducted a few of the consultations. We're hoping to conduct a few more moving forward. Sorry, the clicker is acting up. So our plan essentially is to conduct these consultations between now and the Clean Energy Ministerial. Yep. So we will be announcing the pledge with the Cool champions that we're hoping to work with between now and July in Goa, at which point we will be announcing the pledge. And then from Goa, the G20 and Clean Energy Ministerial up until COP28 is when we're going to be focusing on getting commitments for the pledge. So now really is the time to start working on that draft, working on getting as much input and feedback as possible to ensure that we have the strongest wording in that document as possible. So again, here are just a few of the champions that we have working with us, and we're hoping to get more from the room here today and the wider ecosystem as well. And we really want to make sure that we have as many stakeholders involved as possible, whether that's countries, whether that's non-state actors, civil society organizations, the private sector, industry leaders, etc. So if you have any questions, you can please reach out to us. We'll be sending out this presentation to everyone that is registered for this session, and we hope to get as much feedback as possible for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation on the UAE Presidency's vision for greater ambition in sustainable cooling at COP28 and on the status of the Global Cooling Pledge and the momentum towards COP. I now request Mr. Thomas Anker Christensen to deliver his presentation on his vision for greater ambition in sustainable cooling towards COP28.
Thank you very much. I'm here representing the Cool champion from Denmark, Minister Dan Jorgensen. You saw his picture in the photos, and thank you very much for inviting us to be here to share a few thoughts with you. Denmark was part of the coalition of countries that with UNEP and other partners launched the Cooling Coalition in 2019 at the Secretary General Summit. We have been working diligently on advancing the cool proposition, and we're very happy that it's all now coming together under the leadership of India as G20 presidency and the UAE as the incoming president of the COP28. We heard the challenge from the incoming COP presidency. Cooling is the second fastest growing use of electricity and will have tripled by 2050. There are 10 new cooling appliances sold every second, according to the IEA. And tackling cooling really requires a multi-pronged approach, from energy performance standards to building codes to efficient and renewable cold chains. Nature-based solutions are required to reduce the need for cooling in the first place, but energy efficiency and renewable energy must go hand in hand. And I think as G20 delegates, we were yesterday invited to visit Gift City here in Gandhinagar, and that was a really, really impressive example of what India is doing in this space. And in Gift City, we also witnessed the use of district cooling, which is a new approach to cooling. And in my country, we have all our big cities are heated with district heating, but clearly in India and warmer shores, district cooling might also be a very efficient way of distributing cold by also reducing the number of air conditioners in individual households and having access to a joint facility that lowers energy use and actually is a much more efficient way of producing cold and in colder climates heat. And it's that kind of multi-stakeholder approach to tackle the cooling challenge that we hope can really come into fore in Dubai, where the agenda that the Emirates is presenting to us is really, really ambitious. The global cooling pledge that we just saw really could drive this agenda, and the events that we have in the calendar leading there, including the G20 ministerial and the Clean Energy ministerial, will provide unique opportunities to ramp up action on sustainable cooling. And if I may add a suggestion to the calendar, we saw the impact that the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol is believed to have, and even with that amendment, we will still be tripling cooling by 2050. There are 147 countries that have ratified the Kigali Amendment, so it's not universally ratified yet. And maybe we could add that to the agenda for the rest of the year to drive that ratification to a full ratification by all parties to the Montreal Protocol. That would be an impressive addition to the action this year. As I mentioned, India and Denmark have a strong green strategic bilateral partnership where cooling is part of the agenda. We are deepening our exchanges, and we have supported the establishment of 2 large programs on cooling in India with respective ministries, one on urban cooling and one on cold chain in the framework of this UNEP Cool Coalition that also has the buy-in from Danish private sector. You saw the CEO of Danfoss in the Cool Champion list, and Danfoss is the major Danish company operating in this space, also in India. We want to ensure that everyone, everywhere has access to sustainable cooling solutions and technologies, and that will require a further uplift in international cooperation. It will require dedicated climate finance and increased leadership from key players. And in that sense, the multiple benefits will include increased energy and food security. It will drive down emissions. It will reduce loss and damage associated with climate change. And it will, of course, also benefit the general population. So it is really a multiple win agenda that we're looking at here, ladies and gentlemen, and we're very happy to be part of driving it forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Thomas Anker Christensen. And now I hand over the floor and the session to Ms. Lily Riahi, Global Coordinator of Cool Coalition UNEP, and Mr. Arijit Sengupta, Director BEE, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, to open the G20 and invited countries moderated discussion.
It would be great if we could now invite the countries to join us in the discussion, and also if we could move to the next slide. So the next session we'll look at getting inputs from invited country guests on G20 countries on both the pledge and also on what actions we need to take to scale up sustainable cooling and how we can harness the G20 and COP28 processes to strengthen collaboration. So I see that everyone has joined us. And I think we're just missing colleagues from Japan, please. Okay. So before we start the discussion, perhaps I can just give every delegate a moment to introduce yourself and just give us your view on cooling. Let me start with you, Thomas, if I may, since we just heard from you.
Thomas Anker Christensen, the climate envoy of Denmark. I'm double-hatted in that I'm both in the Danish Ministry for Foreign Affairs, but also in the Danish Ministry of Climate and Energy, and really supporting the Danish Prime Minister in her leadership role, but also the various other ministers in the Danish government. And for us, it's an all-of-government and all-of-society effort to lift the global climate challenge, and we see, as I said in my intervention, cooling as a central component with energy efficiency, and of course the further drive towards scaling renewable energy and bringing down emissions. It's sort of a everything, everywhere, all at once kind of approach that we're in right now. But thank you.
Anand Shukla from Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. We have been working very closely on the built environment here in India. So when it comes to built environment, we cover the building materials here, building design, and also at the city planning level. So different thematic areas we have been working on. And particularly on the building energy efficiency part, we have been working very closely with Bureau of Energy Efficiency since last 10 years. And the energy efficiency code for the residential building that came out in 2018, we are happy that we assisted Bureau in preparing all that. That basically covers passive aspects of building design. So I think in the previous session we listened to very clearly that the building design and the passive measures are very, very important here. So from that perspective, cooling is something which is very close to us, and we are planning at the moment to initiate a new program on space cooling in buildings. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Libby Green. So I head up climate and energy work for the UK government and in India. I'm a British diplomat, but I started working on climate change when I was posted to Copenhagen and COP15 took place. So I got a bit of the climate bug, and then I moved to China where I worked on climate and energy, and then I seem to just keep coming back to it. And it's such a hugely important issue to work on in India, as India is the third largest emitter by country size, although of course not by per capita. And cooling is a really important issue for the UK. We're putting significant ODA funding into cooling, including in India and Africa, and we're concretely supporting the development of centres of excellence for sustainable cooling and cold chain technology here in India as well as Africa. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Okay, I'm Tebe Mamakoko. I'm from South Africa in the Ministry of Mineral Resources and Energy. And I just want to share a few things with regards to this. From South Africa, cooling is embedded in our national energy efficiency strategy. It's not a big well, it is an important issue, but not as big as in other countries, necessarily because we are focusing on households and also electric heating aspects. So it then becomes important in that aspect where we looking at introducing the maps, the building codes, and in those areas. So I think it then becomes important for us to as we are moving to COP. To look into those aspects because it's also linked to our pledges that we have made through the Paris Agreement. So it has got that huge potential in terms of emission savings for the country. So I'll pause here for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is Takuma Otake from the Ministry of Economy and Trade and Industry of Japan. And our energy, as you know, Japan is a very small, tiny island country with almost no natural resources. So our energy policy begins with, starting from the energy conservation every time. So as you know, we have invested in many, money on developing saving energy technologies, and we will continue to, contribute to deliver it all over the world and saving energy. And we very welcome that nowadays, not only focusing on energy efficiency technology, but also focusing on the kind of behavioral things. As a mom, as I mentioned, that we have started cool with actions. That is encourage serious Japanese business person like me to remove our jacket and ties in summertime and set the AC on 26 or 27 degrees and for saving energy from the cooling. So we are very welcome such kind of actions for saving energy all over the world. So and we would like to contribute to facilitate such kind of discussion by sharing many experiences in these areas. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all of you for your introductions. So, and of course, we are privileged to have all of you in this panel today. So we have a few set of guiding questions we have prepared for the panel. I think everyone can see it in their respective screens. So without further ado, and since we're running a bit short of time, so I will just request our panelists to kindly share your thoughts and views on these guiding questions, and also based on the discussion that we had in the inaugural session, and of course the papers that we have shared with you. So can we start from you, Thomas?
As I said in my remarks, considering also pushing for the ratification of the Kigali Amendment by all parties could be one additional element we should think of. I think the question overall of energy efficiency and power demand reduction is also a salient one to include. I mean, we could see in Europe last year with the energy crisis that we faced, that by encouraging people to scale down their energy use, we actually we had a 20% reduction in the use of energy and of gas without any sort of major regulatory interventions, simply by encouraging people to change their behavior, and that sort of shows the flexibility of people at large. If you explain to them why they need to change their energy behavior, they are actually ready to do so. So having that behavioral element also as part of a cooling push could be very helpful as well. Thank you.
Well, as I said in the beginning, our core is the built environment, and from our experience, what we would like to say is develop an understanding of the local context. When I say local context, it's basically the mapping exercise, the heat mapping exercise. I think that's the first element, because if you have a sound basis with data and simulations carried out, that gives you the flavor of what should be done here, whether it is building or the cold chains or type of building materials. And if I look at the main elements that are mentioned in the pledge, I think all these elements are already mentioned. It also adds to the nature-based solutions. I think in the previous session we listened to that. And all that will come through the international cooperation. I think all these elements are highlighted. And when it comes to implementation, the states and the city authorities has a major role to implement anything. You know, you design at the national level the policies, but when it comes to the implementation, so the trainings, capacity building exercise becomes the core of it. Then comes the financing part, because if I compare with other programs here in the country, you know, you need funding for that. You know, you have policies, you have training programs, but to implement those policies, I think you need funding for that. That's the core of it, I would say. There are many other elements, but I think that's the macro level I can say here, the elements covered in the pledge. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, so very interesting questions. I think we've got a really great opportunity this year with India as president of G20 and also hosting Mission Innovation and the SEM. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how we, making the most of that, those joint meetings in July in Goa. So in terms of process, I'm really interested to see how that works and how much we can push the cooling agenda. And the UK will be very keen to be involved as we co-lead the heat and cooling innovation community at Mission Innovation. And then in terms of substance, again, I think learning from India, Prime Minister Modi's LIFE initiative can teach us a lot on behavioural change and the kind of theory of nudge theory. I also, when I visited Japan, was very impressed by the Cool Biz initiative. So just thinking about how we can integrate Mission Life with this pledge would also be great.
I'm really sorry. I have to go and give an intervention in the other panel. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think I will share similar sentiments that the issue of you know, awareness and capacity building becomes very important, so that our communities understand the effectiveness and the impact of this process. But I think also there are three issues that I think I should raise. I mean, deriving from the experience in my own country, I think there are issues of health, comfort, and safety that are quite crucial. But there's also an issue around food and agriculture, insofar as cooling is concerned, which is also one of those important things, but also the health aspects from the medicine and vaccination point of view. So what we would want to urge, I think there are four areas that we're looking at. Is in terms of the cooling system itself. We are hoping that as we go to COP28, because of you know, the intention of the COP28 presidency, I think the issues around cooling equipment becomes important. The issues of cool roofs or cool buildings. It is one of those important factors, but also I think the acceleration in terms of financing. And I heard the initial remarks that I think it's one of those key considerations, which is quite important. And as part of those that are part of the Kigali Amendment, so I think the issue of circular economy is one of those important aspects in terms of how do you deal with the issues of waste, but also the intervention in terms of recycling facilities. So I think those are the critical points that would want to raise, and we hope that they will get traction as we consider these issues that are being asked for input. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for preparing great agendas. And I just quickly has a response to all. And first, buildings and manufacturing sector. It's very simple because maybe engineer backgrounds persons will know that the key point of technology is how can we exchange and utilize the heat well. So this kind of the place using the very high temperature heat and low temperature heat, the place which uses both is a place we can elaborate our activities for saving energies. And next questions. I'm not so sure that we can make the target sufficient because reference point maybe is very critical for us because we are continuing so long time. So if the setting point is maybe 2022, it is so tough to reduce emission from that moment. So we hope that that kind of criteria should be very fair for and the next point, maybe there are various potential, but we are very appreciate that Indian initiatives are focusing on energy efficiency. The saving energy is one first priority energy sources. So we really respect the concept and we perfectly share the concept. And the final point, maybe similar. So and very similar. So we really appreciate it for focusing on saving energy technology because from our perspective, it is more efficient for putting money on saving energy, technologies in this moment than the putting on money on renewable. So of course, renewable is also very important. So we need to approach both, but we for sure we need to focus on saving energy sector after any more. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us and giving your interventions on our efforts towards cooling in the G20 and the COP28 process. Your inputs have been duly noted and will be included in the outcome document. So thank you very much. And now I'd like to call the next round of countries to join us. So if we can just give a round of applause to.
Thank you very much, each one of you. That truly.
So I'd like to call the United Arab Emirates to join us. I think Dr. Moza from the Ministry of Energy is with us. We also have Singapore, and also Republic of Korea. And I know there was colleagues from Brazil who had intended to join us. They're here. Yes, Singapore. It's okay. Yes, Singapore. Yeah. Korea. Yes, this is Korea.
Brazil.
Brazil, yeah, I don't know if colleagues of Brazil or Italy are with us. That's okay. Okay. So if I may, in order to get started, we need the questions back up, please. So maybe I can start with you, Brian. I know that Singapore has certainly been known to be a leader in cooling. It would be great to have your views on some of the questions that have been discussed today, including, in the perspective of Singapore, have the cooling action areas been captured sufficiently in the pledge? Should there be any additional considerations to the collective target? And how can we best leverage G20 and platform towards the COP28 efforts on cooling? Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Lily, for giving me the floor. And also, I would also like to extend my appreciation to the organizers, UNEP, as well as the government of India for inviting me and Singapore to provide our perspectives on this topic. Firstly, I would like to share that Singapore is an island state situated near the equator. Our temperatures average about 28 to 34 degrees Celsius, and as such, cooling is an integral part of our lives. And with the increased energy consumption from cooling, emissions have also risen. I would just like to share a statistic from the World Wildlife Fund. So cooling emissions represent approximately 11.5 of Singapore's greenhouse gas emissions. And cooling is also one of our highest consumption usage for electricity in Singapore. The WWF also estimates that energy demand for cooling will rise from approximately 15.3 terawatt hours today to approximately 25.4 terawatt hours by 2030 as a result of rising global temperatures from climate change and the urban heat island effect in Singapore. And in this regard, it is important that clean cooling solutions will play an increasingly important role for us, especially since we recently announced our net zero emissions pledge by 2050. Singapore has made significant progress in adopting clean cooling solutions, and allow me to share 3 key initiatives. So for one, firstly, we are optimizing cooling design and infrastructure in line with the Singapore Green Plan 2030. Currently, we have implemented the Singapore Green Building Master Plan, which sets 3 targets to support our sustainability ambitions, including an 80% improvement in energy efficiency for best-in-class green buildings by 2030. And on design, we have been increasing the provision of greenery and piloting the use of cool paint on building facades to moderate the rise in urban heat. In addition to that, JTC Corporation and the Building and Construction Authority, which are 2 government agencies in Singapore, have also piloted the use of cool materials in industrial buildings and education institutions to absorb less heat and decrease surrounding air temperature. Secondly, we are promoting the adoption of innovative solutions. So under the Cooling Singapore 2.0 program, Singapore is developing a digital urban climate twin to help identify the key sources of UHI effect to guide our strategies, including the planning of buildings and neighborhoods. And thirdly, we have been raising energy performance standards for buildings and cooling equipment, such as air conditioners and refrigerators. These are mandated by the Building Construction Authority as well as the National Environment Agency. So as you can see, it's an area which is cross-cutting across multiple government agencies in Singapore. In addition to these efforts, as mentioned earlier, because of the multiple agencies involved in this effort, we have formed an interagency cooling solutions work group to facilitate the adoption of clean cooling solutions with net economic and carbon benefits. The work group comprises agencies from various sectors such as climate change, energy, buildings, and environment, which allows a comprehensive sharing of expertise in evaluating quantitative and qualitative aspects of various cooling solutions in the market today. I hope some of these initiatives done by the Singapore government will help to offer useful perspectives and inputs to the discussions later on today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Now, if I may hand over to you on giving us the views from the Korean perspective and also very much a leader on cooling.
Okay. My name is Song Sam-chung from Korean Energy Economic Institute, and our institute is working closely with MOTI, the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy in Korea. And first of all, it's very honor for me to participating in such a meaningful event as a panel. And actually, I was supposed to attend this meeting uh, in the round table as with you and just to listen all the presentation and interventions. But last night at the dinner table, I was asked to attend as a panel by Lily, and she worked really hard for preparing this meeting. And recent years, the Korea also has been monitoring the power reserve ratio in almost every day during the summer to preparing for the blackouts. So the cooling is also a big challenges even in Korea. So I believe that from the perspective of international cooperation, it is very important to create and share the innovative business models that could be replicated easily, not only for cooling, but also for overall energy issues that we may face along the transition pathway. And of course, this requires many other elements. It requires technical support and financial support, as well as the policy support. So all complex elements are required, and none of them are not unimportant. So in fact, I believe that putting everything possible into practice right now is the most important. Like this, gathering these ways and have some discussion. Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, even at the last moment. Very, very good to have your views. And now I'd like to hand over to Dr. Moza from the United Arab Emirates Ministry of Energy.
Hello, everyone. She insists of calling me doctor, and I'm just an engineer. So, first of all, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be among all of these mentalities. So, thank you, Lily, for the invitation. I will just highlight some initiatives we are working on as a Ministry of Energy Infrastructure in UAE regarding the cooling system or efficient cooling system. Actually, in 2017, when we start designing the demand side, the national demand side management for UAE, we designed the program to cover the top consuming sector in UAE, including building, agriculture, transportation, and industry. And all of that is coming also with an awareness campaign to target a special segment of UAE community. So, as it was mentioned and obvious to everyone, is cooling is the highest contributor for building sector. So we have a couple of initiatives. I will highlight them. First one is implementing the Green Building Code, starting from legislation, standardization, and any specification required for an efficient cooling system in UAE. This system contributes to almost 40% of the saving from the sector itself. The second initiative is building retrofits. We are focusing on retrofitting the cooling system, covering the chillers, HVAC, heat recovery system, cooling towers, and operation maintenance for the entire system. Also, we are working on efficient cooling system. Mainly, we are focusing on district cooling. So the idea is to support cooling operation and technology investment to increase the penetration of district cooling amongst Emirates. We have a very successful story in big cities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi, but the idea is to increase that to the northern Emirates of UAE. The initiative will contribute to 90% of the saving in the sector itself. And the last one is working on the equipment standards. We are trying to cover a new categories, for example, the ducted coolings. So this is a couple of initiatives we are working on in the National Demand Side Committee in UAE. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Singapore, Korea, and UAE, for your initial remarks. So again, as we had done in the last panel, so there are a few guiding questions that have been prepared. So would like all of you to kindly reflect on those and kindly share your views. Yeah. So can you start with you? Yeah.
Okay, I'll try my best. Yep. Okay, so anyway, I forgot to introduce myself earlier. I'm Brian from the Energy Market Authority from Singapore. So the Energy Market Authority is actually the electricity regulator in Singapore. So we don't exactly cover cooling, but as I mentioned earlier, because the multi-agency initiative in Singapore, it's also led by EMA is also involved in this multi-agency discussions, but it's also led by agencies such as our Building Construction Authority, National Environment Agency, and the Ministry of National Development. So when it comes to the things such as the global cooling pledge, I personally I'm from the energy track, the energy sectoral, so I'm not exactly tuned into the discussions for this pledge. But based on past experiences, Singapore has always tended to be a very constructive contributor to the not only the G20 negotiations but also the COP negotiations. So actually 2 years ago, our Minister for Sustainability and Environment, Grace Fu, was a co-facilitator for ministerial consultations for Article 6 with Norway back in 2021. So actually, when it comes to some of these international collaborations, Singapore stands ready to work with our international partners to advance cooperation, especially in initiatives pertaining to sustainable development, climate change, and I'm sure for this, for sustainable cooling, it's something which my colleagues from the other agencies will be very keen to look at.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm working at the Korean Energy Economy Institute. So I attend this meeting on behalf of Moti. And actually, one of my colleagues attended the same meeting 2 weeks ago in the SAM in Brazil. And so, as I mentioned, the Korea also is cooling is one of the big challenges in Korea, and Moti also has interested in this sustainable cooling. And so I just work really closely with Moti, and probably next time, because Moti attend the main event now, so but maybe later in the other meetings, Moti also want to attend and then keep going to continue discussions with you, probably. Thank you.
Okay, I will keep it short. I think the pledge is very comprehensive, so I wish you all success on this initiative. I think there's a lot of potential in building capacity, bringing a new unified regulation in the future upcoming from this. So, and also engaging the private sector as much as we can to build a financial scheme and incentive program in the future. And maybe one day it will be costly friendly to the community. We are talking about the big systems like district cooling. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Okay, so I think with that, we can thank you so much for your participation and your inputs, which will shape, as I said, the outcome document for this session. And just can say, it's encouraging to hear that so many of the country representatives here have taken many of the actions that are reflected in the pledge and in the actions that we're trying to take forward, well, we being the COP28 presidency team. So thank you for giving us that confidence and for also offering your support to take these international collaboration on this effort forward with us. So again, I'd like to thank our colleagues from Singapore, from Republic of Korea, from the UAE, and also again from our last panel, the United Kingdom, from Denmark, from Switzerland, South Africa, Japan, and of course India. And with that, I'll hand over back to the MC. Thank you.
Proceeding further, we will now discuss showcasing leadership in India's cooling community and kickstart with a few framing introducings. I welcome onto the podium now Mr. Brian Motherway, Head of the Energy Efficiency Division, International Energy Agency, to share his remarks on cooling as the blind spot of energy transition.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to the host, particular thanks to BE for its leadership in this area, and of course to UNEP and the other partners, and a warm commendation to the COP presidency for its leadership on all of these issues, but also putting cooling front and center. We're delighted to be part of the Cooling Coalition, and our Executive Director, Dr. Biral, is delighted to be a cooling champion and looks forward to continuing that. About 5 or 6 years ago, we started calling cooling a blind spot in energy because we felt it wasn't getting enough attention as a social and well-being issue, but also as an energy issue because it was growing so fast. And it continues to grow really quickly around the world because the world is getting hotter. More people need, as a basic necessity, some form of cooling, and that's only going to continue. And of course, as cooling becomes more affordable and more accessible, this brings benefits to millions and billions of people's lives, but has huge implications for energy and climate issues. And as we mentioned earlier, our analysis says that between now and 2050, every single second, 10 air conditioners are being bought somewhere around the world. And so that's a huge challenge, but also a huge opportunity, because we have an opportunity as policymakers and stakeholders to influence the nature of those purchases, how they are bought and how they are used. So cooling is only going to grow, and that's why it's really important that we have this policy focus. And what I really want to share with you is, over the last few years, our understanding of cooling issues and therefore the policy responses has really grown. So I just want to share a couple of data points to show how we better understand the issues and how we can address them. First of all, cooling is growing because in some countries, such as the US and Japan, pretty much everybody owns an air conditioner. And I'm focusing on air conditioning, but we know that cooling is a much wider issue in terms of cold chain, food, vaccines, also different ways to cool people in their homes, in their workplaces. But I'll focus on air conditioning. And in many of the hottest parts of the world, there's a great disparity where at the present, very small proportions of people have access to cooling technologies such as ACs. And of course, that makes our lives less comfortable, less healthy, and it's a good thing that many more people are getting access to cooling, but it has huge implications in terms of the growth in these marketplaces over the coming years. If we get policy right, there's a huge opportunity to deliver cooling to millions of people, but in a way that greatly limits the growth in energy demand and therefore emissions growth. And this chart shows that just the difference between two of our core scenarios, which is a kind of a business as usual scenario of people, if governments do nothing extra, versus if they fulfill their pledges, particularly around net zero, in terms of making cooling more efficient, more based on clean energy, making building themselves more efficient, as well as wider issues around city design, the way we live our lives, the way we design our communities. So there's a lot at play here. There's a huge opportunity to become vastly more efficient. And the reason why that opportunity exists is, of those 10 air conditioners bought every second, on average, they're literally half as efficient as they might be. In any given market, in any part of the world, the range of efficiency of air conditioners on sale is really dramatic. It's of a factor of more than 2. And without going into all the details of this chart, just the breadth there shows you the difference between the worst and the best technologies available, and the average sales are much nearer the worst than they are near the best today. So typically anybody buying an air conditioner right now is buying one of the less efficient models on the market. We can explore why that is around in terms of consumer choices, what they're being offered, what they're being marketed, but also the role of policy here is crucial in terms of the kind of measures that India is leading on, such as standards and labeling, understanding, helping people, both sellers and buyers of air conditioners, pushing them towards the more efficient technologies. And that's where the opportunity lies. What I want to say is, as we explore data here without dwelling on this detail, one thing we're finding when you look in detail of any given market, in this case the example of Vietnam, it's very true, and I think most people would recognize that over the lifetime, a more efficient air conditioner will save you money because whatever it costs to buy, you will save money running it. But what is also true is the more efficient model is not necessarily the more expensive model to buy. And that's a really crucial point, that in any given market, as you can see from the chart here on the left, lots of these lower dots represent more efficient ACs available on a given market that are actually cheaper to buy than the less efficient, more popular models. So again, policy has a crucial role here in driving manufacturers and retailers towards the more efficient, lower cost technologies, but also driving consumers towards those technologies. A key measure, of course, is minimum performance standards like we have here in India, like we have in hundreds of countries around the world. You can see the shift towards the right, towards the green bars here, that many more countries are introducing minimum energy performance standards, which are driving the quality and the efficiency of technologies up. But in many cases, they need to be reinforced, they need to be strengthened as technologies get better, but they also need to be properly implemented, enforced, followed up on, monitored and measured. And energy efficiency as a whole, and cooling in particular, raises many challenges around implementation and action on the ground. And that's why policy leadership is so important. And that's why the cooling pledge is so important, because when you have leadership from the top, when you have firm international and national commitment to cooling and other efficiency measures, that's when action really is driven on the ground, and action really can change people's lives for the better, make cooling available to more people, but in ways that don't put excessive stress on energy and climate systems, and leads to a better outcome for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, Mr. Brian Motherway. I would now like to invite Mr. Sarbajit Pal, Manager of Partnership Clean Energy, Ministerial Secretariat, to share his views.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, sorry. I am Sharbajit, working with the Secretariat of the Clean Energy Ministerial government-to-government platform, bringing together 29 forward-leaning countries voluntarily working together for accelerating the global deployment of clean energy solutions at scale. Before I give my presentation, let me first offer my sincere thanks to the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Director General Bakre and his team, the Ministry of Power and the other organizations and partners for this invitation to this very important G20 side event on cooling. From what we have heard during the earlier interventions and the presentation from the International Energy Agency, I don't have to re-emphasize the importance of this key topic. Cooling is an absolutely vital issue to address and will, without proactive action, become the single largest potential source of energy demand in the coming decades across most of the emerging and developing economies. And while the emphasis needs to be on pushing the boundaries of energy efficiency for cooling technologies, as Brian highlighted, there is a strong and significant difference between the best-in-class technology available versus its penetration in the market. This is where the role of policymaking becomes ever so critical to unlock the deployment of high-efficient cooling solutions, and where international collaboration could enhance the pace of deployment and ensure that it takes place at scale. This is also the key area of focus for the SEM, and drawing from an effective example of global collaboration we have seen on lighting under India's leadership. I will try to highlight how this could potentially work in practice, perhaps also for the cooling pledge. Drawing inspiration from India's Ujala program, ministers convened at the 6th Clean Energy Ministerial in May 2015 announced the launch of a global lighting challenge under the SEM's Super Efficient Equipment and Appliance Deployment Initiative, or as some of you practitioners better know it as SEED. With that confirmation, the Global Lighting Challenge was opened up at COP28 in Paris, welcoming endorsement from countries, support from market enablers, manufacturing companies, commitment from participants, and partner institutions and organizations. The goal was simple: raise commitments to deploy 10 billion LEDs worldwide. Through a wide mix of actions ranging from demand aggregation to diversification of manufacturing and complementary subnational campaigns, such as in Sweden, introduced by the endorsing governments, the campaign was able to exceed its target in less than 3 years, reaching a commitment of 14 billion LEDs by 2018. It was truly transformational global collaborative effort in action, and not only did it elevate the profile of lighting to the highest levels of policy making, but it accelerated the transition to high efficient lighting worldwide, working hand in hand with the wide ecosystem of partners. It's quite heartening to see almost all lights in this room and all the venue is all light LEDs. Some key features of this seed campaign on lighting that led to its success were: it had a simple and easy to understand goal that everybody could rally behind. It was from the outset designed to be truly public-private collaboration effort with leadership from governments working closely with industry, large demand aggregators and partner organizations. It was easy to track progress of its deployment, and it benefited from an existing global collaborative platform providing regular supporting analysis and tracking. While it might not be straightforward to replicate such a model for the global cooling pledge, this experience gives us valuable insights about what such global collaborative efforts could truly collaborative efforts like these could be truly transformation. With 24 participating governments and IEA as its coordinator, along with a host of partner institutions, the same SEED initiative, which formed the platform for the Global Cooling Challenge, also considered cooling as one of its central themes for collaborative actions. Under the UK's COP26 presidency, the SEED initiative was used as a platform for launching the presidency's product call to action, with the aim of doubling the efficiency levels of 4 high priority appliance and equipment, including residential cooling appliances, by 2030. The SEED initiative then helps the signatory governments to work with their domestic stakeholders to benchmark their current efficiency levels and identify the doubling goal based on their national circumstances, as well as helping them track progress and share experiences. And while though the SEED product efficiency call to action, we have taken strong first steps, much more still needs to be done to ratchet up the pace of the transformation required in cooling. It is in that context that we much welcome the discussions on the pledge and encourage leading members to consider creatively leveraging existing platforms and partnerships such as the Cool Coalition to help deliver on this pledge goal. And finally, I'll just leave you with the message that the upcoming 14th Clean Energy Ministerial under India's leadership this July will be providing an opportunity to engage with ministers, industry leaders and key stakeholders and would be a natural stepping stone raising the profile and commitments on cooling in the lead up to COP28 in UAE. Leveraging global platforms and engaging with relevant stakeholders, we will work towards making this a truly transformational year for energy efficient cooling worldwide. Thank you once again for giving me this opportunity to brief you.
Thank you very much, sir, Mr. Sarbajit Pal, for discussing the importance of leveraging global platforms for action to transform cooling. I now invite on stage the moderators for the next session, Mrs. Parimita Mohanty, Senior Program Manager, Energy Transition at UNEP, and Ms. Pravata Nalini Samal, Director, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Ministry of Power, Government of India.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here among you all to share BEE's experience, BEE's cooling interventions, as well as to take part in the moderation with the civil societies and the industries in the cooling interventions. So, from the morning we have been hearing what is the need of cooling interventions and why the world actually stepping towards various cooling interventions to meet the cooling demand of the world. But in India, if we say about the cooling demand, as Mr. Abhay Bakre in the morning emphasized that the cooling demand actually will be will be increasing 8 to 10 folds by 2040. So it's very crucial for our country as well to take various cooling interventions to meet the cooling demand. So our target as per the India Cooling Action Plan is to reduce about 20 to 25% of the cooling demand by 2037-38. So, as myself managing the program on the appliances energy efficiency, I just want to highlight that what are the recent interventions we have taken in the appliances sector. Till now, we have added 34 appliances, out of which 14 appliances we have made mandatory, and the MEPS, the minimum energy performance standard, we have increased the AC to 5. Yes, fan in India, the fan segment is cannot be ignored because the production, the population of fan is around 41 million. So we have made the fan also mandatory, and we have introduced other segment of the fans like table fan, pedestal fan, and wall-mounted fan as included in the standards and labeling program. We have also made the diffuser and LCAC as the mandatory program for standards and labeling, and we have been working on VG cooler, on the display cabinet, VRF. To introduce under standards and labeling program, and already discussed that 24 degrees centigrade as the default temperature we have implemented in our country. So these are various interventions we have taken under our appliances energy efficiency. We are also working to introduce the standards for the cold chain appliances, and also we are trying to integrate these energy efficient appliances in our energy consumption building code. So these are some of the interventions that we are working upon, but without the support of other stakeholders like industries and other government organizations and civil societies, this will not be possible. So just to have a good discussion on their role in the cooling intervention, so I would like to request my co-moderator to introduce the panelists for a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Pravat Lalini. Good afternoon to everyone. What a day so far. I mean, it is excellent that we have so much of deliberations and discussions, so much of fruitful and forward-looking points. But the discussions would not be complete without the deliberation with the civil societies, with the industries, academic institutions, and the intergovernmental agencies. That's why this session is going to focus more on the deliberations of experts working on cooling in the country, India, and see what their views are, what their thought processes are to take this cooling priority sector forward. So with this, of course, again, it would be similar to the earlier session. So I'll invite, we have number of experts already available in this room. So I'll invite in two rounds. So, and there is absolutely no preference. So we just followed the way the name has been registered in the registration desk. So I'll invite experts, maybe 7 experts initially, and then in the second round, 7 more experts. So in the first round, I would like to invite Mr. Satish Kumar from AEEE. Ms. Andrea, Head of Global Public Industry Affairs and Communication from Danfoss Climate Solutions. Mr. Sonal Kumar, Program Lead in the Sustainable Cooling Team, CEW. Georgia Pasculetto, Energy Efficiency and Cooling Specialist, AC for All. Mr. Pankaj Mehta, Managing Director, Carrier. Mr. Yogesh Thakkar, National President, ISRE. And I think we have one more. Mr. Bisal Thapa, Senior Director, CLASP. And of course, we will invite other experts in the second round immediately after the discussions of this round. And I'm extremely sorry, but we have to be wrapping up the sessions probably faster. So my sincere request to all the experts here to focus on the discussions and try to be within 2 minutes while giving your remarks. So starting with that, of course, we have put the guiding questions here. And as we discussed, the main point is how could we implement the whatever would be the vision, mission, and the pledge or the commitments that would be set. What should be the approach, and how should we make sure that we have international collaborations happening to make the cooling agenda forward? So we aim in terms of collaborative outcomes that can support the implementation of these cooling priorities and the pledges. So with this regard, what is your view where the focus should be? Should it be on the technology? Should it be on finance? Should it be on capacity building or awareness generations and linking to behavioral changes and those kind of things? Where do you think the focus should be? And how could we take these things forward? So that would be the main point if we can discuss. So maybe I would start with you, Satish ji, your view and reactions to this.
So 2 minutes may be difficult, but definitely try to keep it short. Thank you, Ms. Mohanty, Ms. Samal, and all the speakers on the dais. I want to thank BE and UAE government and the Cool Coalition for giving this opportunity. In my opinion, India is uniquely positioned to be leading from the front as we put this coalition together and showcase its leadership at COP28. I have 5 examples backed up from public, private, and civil society organizations, which I believe have global relevance and can help focus our collective efforts. So from a vulnerability and opportunity perspective, India has 4.2 trillion person cooling degree days of cooling demand, an aggregate number combining the severity of the hot climate along with its population. And just to put things in perspective, this is equal to the cooling demand from the US, Europe, China put together. As per India Cooling Action Plan, India may be needing 200 gigawatt in terms of the peak electricity power to satisfy its cooling demand in the next 2 decades. And I believe that this is likely to be a similar scenario in many other tropical countries. So when we talk about just an equitable energy transition, I want the global community to look holistically and make thermal comfort for all a key pillar of this critical transition. On the second piece, on the policy front, India has led with the development of India Cooling Action Plan under the leadership of Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and made significant contributions towards developing the National Cooling Action Plan methodology under the Cool Coalition umbrella. Here, AEEE has played a leading role in both of them and ready to contribute even more in future as many global south countries are developing or implementing their national cooling action plans. This presents a clear opportunity to collaborate with other G20 countries and especially those in the global south. On the research side, India is home to adaptive thermal comfort standards, a first principle empirical research and survey-based construct that is perfectly aligned with the LIFE mission as it puts behavior, technology, and policy right at the center of the sustainable cooling transition. Japan and India examples to issue national directives on set point temperatures are aligned with our physiological requirements and to this forward-looking standard. While there are many other initiatives, I would like to highlight a couple of them. How to mainstream district cooling technology, an initiative where AEEE under the guidance of BE and GIZ in partnership with UNEP is helping overcome the challenges and develop an implementation model. And Global Cooling Prize winners GRI and Daikin have demonstrated that 5x climate-friendly cooling solutions, which are tested here at the state-of-the-art testing lab at the CEPT University. And I see Professor Rajan Rawal, who is behind both global cooling price testing and adaptive thermal comfort standard here, and that it is possible and countries need to encourage the most energy efficient solutions by helping fast track the adoption of these super energy efficient cooling solutions. On the financing and investment side, enabling a credit facility to address the upfront capex requirement and its deployment for the most vulnerable countries in the global south is a global imperative. If the coming COP28 can help come up with a dedicated cooling financing facility of $50 billion to start with to catalyze peak demand reduction, and help achieve thermal comfort, because cooling is really out of reach for many billions of people around the world. And encourage cooling as a service and next generation of building controls for better control of set point temperatures. And finally, on the capacity building front, where the demand for sustainable cooling solutions is converging with the demand for net zero energy, water and waste building and habitats, Solar Decathlon India, an initiative of IEEE and IIHS, is driving an ecosystem shift towards passively designed, thermally comfortable, water sufficient and affordable buildings. Solar Decathlon India has immense potential for a scale up to G20 countries through its innovative interventions and skill building of future building energy professionals. So in closing, IEEE strongly supports the creation of an international sustainable cooling center or hub in India that will be uniquely positioned to serve as a global resource on the policy, technology, behavior, and financing front. I also invite all the people to come and participate in Energize 2023, which is going to be happening in Goa just before COP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Satish ji, for all those very important points. Now maybe I will request Andrea for her remark.
Yes, thank you very much. So my name is Andrea Vogt. I'm head of global public affairs at Danfoss. Danfoss is a global energy efficiency technology provider, one of the leading companies in that field. And heating and cooling is really at the heart of what we are doing. So what I would like to point out here, I wrote down 5 points. I don't know if I will have the time to go through all 5 of them, but I'll give my best. First of all, I think we do have a very unique opportunity with the Kigali Amendment and the energy efficiency agenda. Both can really go very well together as countries put in place their Kigali implementation plans, considering also the energy efficiency there next to the refrigerants is really an opportunity to bring down the overall emissions and to really make a big jump in terms of positioning sustainable cooling very broadly. And that brings me also to the point to say that technology is not an issue, coming to one of your questions. Technology is really available. The issue is more about how do we deploy that technology as broadly as possible everywhere. And in that sense, we very much welcome as a company also the lead that India is taking here and the strong stance in terms of the National Cooling Action Plan, but also in terms of these initiatives and also the pledge in view of the G20. So very, very important example also for this part of the world specifically. And then on your questions, what needs to be done, I think what is really important from my perspective at least is to take a coordinated approach. I'll just take one example of what I saw yesterday. Yesterday we had this opportunity to visit the gift city in here close by, and that was just amazing. It was an amazing example of district cooling, of what it can do and of the advantages and the benefits it brings. And it's an example for everything what I was just saying. It's an example in the sense that the technology is available. It's not at all that we cannot do it, but as a matter of fact, it's not being deployed enough, or it's not being deployed a lot, I should say. Although it brings so many benefits, it brings the benefits of reducing the emissions, of centralizing everything, of being highly efficient, of avoiding the heat islands in the cities, of making sure that that everybody has access. It really, really brings a lot of benefits, but it can only happen if stakeholders work together, if you are not working in silos, and if we bring the different parties and stakeholders around the table so that they plan where the cold, in this case, is needed, and that they can then deploy it. Thomas Anker Christensen earlier was saying in Denmark, we have this for district heating, and it's a very, very successful model for decades already. The same can go for district cooling. It brings the same benefits of this centralized approach and the emission savings that come with it. And then also that brings me also to the fact that the approach to energy efficiency needs to be broad-based. It's very important to scale up highly efficient products, absolutely no doubt about that, but it's just as important to take an integrated approach of the entire energy system to avoid that we end up with peaks that cannot be managed and that may crash the whole grid. That's not what we want, but we all need cooling. It's very crucial and very essential. So let's make sure we have that integrated approach. And as I said, district cooling-based approaches are one important step in that sense, but also making sure that all stakeholders are on board and are included. And then a final point on the importance of training and of skills. Somebody said that beforehand as well, I can't remember who, but it is really crucial. As we move to low and ultra-low global warming potential refrigerants, those refrigerants are very often flammable. They have very often very high pressure. So we need the people to be able to handle those refrigerants safely. And we also need the people to make sure that installations and equipment is installed in the correct way, is sized in the correct way, so that it runs efficiently, because you may have very efficient equipment per se, but if it's not installed in the way it should be installed, then it will still consume a lot of energy. So having the right people, skilling them up, making sure that the certification or whatever schemes it is are in place so that we have the right people who can install all of these installations is very, very crucial to success as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing another round of important points and the integrated and the coordinated approach. That's something what we also discussed. Maybe now I'll turn to this side of the chair. So I'll come to Sonal from CEW perspective and from the coordination and international cooperation perspective. How do you see the overall priorities and how should we move?
Thank you. So I'm Sonal. I'm working in the Sustainable Cooling Team and Council on Energy, Environment and Water. And we had a big part of developing and working action plan and also providing support in and also provide support in am I audible?
Is he audible? Mic is not.
Hello. Yeah. So I represent Council on Energy, Environment and Water, and we have been working on providing support in implementation of ICAP as well as policies on refrigerant transition, nudging consumer behaviors, and also supporting some of the states in developing their policies and action plan for sustainable cooling. So coming to this point of cooling plays and how we see this collaborations and these initiatives. So I think cooling plays is an important tool in terms of setting up a comprehensive and collective vision and goal for transition to sustainable cooling. And India has already taken initiatives on some of the action points, or I say several of the action points suggested in the cooling plays. For example, whether it is performance standards for cooling appliances or building energy codes, integrating passive cooling measures, or awareness generation and nudging consumer behavior, or capacity building programs. So we have a lot of expertise and knowledge gained while developing these policy tools and implementation plan. We also have a lot of experiences in implementation of some of these policies, and from there a lot of learnings have also emerged. So I think these knowledge, expertise and learnings can be leveraged by other global south countries who are heat stressed in their transition to sustainable cooling. So in that way, I see this as an very important step for going forward. I would also like to highlight that while we have these policy tools and implementation, but there are also few challenges which we have also witnessed. For example, there are building energy codes and passive cooling measures, but we are facing challenges in basically deploying it at scale. So mainstreaming this. Similarly, and that can be because of awareness, lack of capacity building at various level, or in tier 2, tier 3 cities level, or also because of, in a sense, having some disconnect between the emerging construction sector needs and the kind of solutions available and the materials available. Similarly, we have performance standards for appliances, but how we can deploy those at scale. So issues related with cost and awareness. And another point I would like to highlight is, and I would categorize it as pre-sales and post-sales. So these performance standards or building design. So these, in a sense, address the issues before it is transferred to the end user. But then how the end user is using that. So whether it is, so if a building is designed for proper ventilation, but if the consumer is not aware about how they can use it to get the proper benefit out of it. So, or if a air conditioner is designed for better efficiencies, but if it is not being serviced and its upkeep is not that well, so the intended benefit is not there. So going forward, we should also look for solutions and initiatives where we can nudge or change the consumer behaviors. And there I see this life initiatives to play a big role in that. So with that, I will conclude my remarks, and thanks.
Thanks, Sonal. I mean, of course, scaling of these interventions are also going to be important. So you mentioned about few of the strategy around that. Thanks for that. Now we'll turn to you, Georgia, to bring your views on this.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible. So thank you very much. And I would like to thank the organizers, the Cool Coalition, the Government of India, and the UAE COP28 presidency for convening this very informative and very important discussion, I think, today. So I think we heard already extensively how sustainable cooling is a key issue for energy transitions and for SDG 7. And at Sustainable Energy for All, we really, our work really focuses on sustainable cooling as an issue of equity, closely linked to SDG 7, both in terms of electricity access and energy transitions. And on the multiple benefits that sustainable cooling brings for development. So by our estimates, in 2022, there were still 1.2 billion people at high risk of lacking access to sustainable cooling worldwide in hot countries and countries with high electrification gaps. And our latest analysis suggests that 700 million of those are women in rural and urban vulnerable communities. So from our perspective, ensuring access to sustainable cooling for all means rapidly scaling up those solutions that are at the intersection of SDG 7, of development priorities, and of course climate action and climate justice. And so we really hope that this global cooling pledge can be a catalyzer for really a step change in policy action and in investments in sustainable cooling. So these are the two key points that I wanted to raise today. From a policy perspective, as we look at implementation, I think it's important that we will, once the pledges and the commitments are unveiled as a community of practice, we use this pledge to, for example, increase and deepen the degree to which we incorporate cooling for all into, for example, electrification planning, both in terms of the need of ensuring access to cooling and to cooling appliances, for example, but also looking at how cooling as a productive use of energy can accelerate, for example, renewable electrification. on one hand. On the other hand, we can also use these commitments to sort of prioritize more systemic approaches to energy efficiency and energy efficient cooling, from nature-based solutions in cities to efficient appliance and building codes and behaviors really going hand in hand. And SC4All is proud to work with the Bureau of Energy Efficiency and many partners in India and mission efficiency partners to sort of strengthen the energy efficiency and build these strong linkages with sustainable cooling. And so, of course, there are many great examples in India that can be leveraged. We heard a lot about the India National Cooling Action Plan, which is already serving as a template for many countries, but also increasingly seen as an investment opportunity, so guiding investments in the country. And also the LIFE campaign we see as a really high impact platform this year to sort of raise awareness and raise the level of the conversation on sustainable cooling and behavior change. Just to conclude, in order to deliver on this step change in policy, we need to use this time to also mobilize new commitments in terms of financing, both from private sector, but also development finance and climate finance institutions, so that as soon as the countries unveil their pledges and their commitment, they can also get to work to implement together with the partners. So SC4All is very proud to support these efforts this year and support also these linkages with the G20 presidency and the Clean Energy Ministerial moving forward. And I will conclude here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Georgia, for all those relevant points. I know we are running a bit late on this, but may I now request Pankaj for bringing his view and from the industries.
Thank you. At the outset, I would like to thank BEE and UNEP for this opportunity. I represent Carrier, and as a leading global provider of healthy, safe, sustainable, and intelligent building and cooling solutions and cold chain solutions, we are proud to be part of this deliberation. Carrier has set very ambitious ESG targets for itself. Our ESG targets 2030 are aimed at solutions for people, the planet, and communities. And one of the major goals there is to helping our customers reduce their GHG emissions by 1 gigaton. And we're doing this by focusing on 3 focus areas. One is obviously energy efficient and sustainable design and innovative solutions, lower GWP refrigerants, and digital use of connected solutions. I think there we can play a major part in making sure the energy efficiency is optimized. And the third part, which also I would like to spend some more time on, is efforts to reduce food loss and food wastage across the world. And as recently as February 2023, we have taken on advanced ESG goals for ourselves. This is in line with the science-based target initiatives, where we have taken a goal of going net zero by 2050 for Carrier across our value chain. So these are a couple of initiatives that we have done. As regards cold chain, well, India, as you know, has a lot of opportunity there. We have a huge percentage of our food getting wasted, and Carrier is working with the government and several agencies to build a sustainable cold chain. We're actually fortunate that we are at a stage where the cold chain is still under development, and we can design it to be more sustainable. These again can be in terms of digitally connected cold chain solutions. We work with the various agencies like UNEP Cool Coalition to make sure that the cold chain in India and other emerging countries is as green and sustainable as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I'll come to you, Bisal, for hearing your views.
Great, thank you very much. The 2-minute challenge is really the first test of efficiency, and judging from the panelists' performance so far, I think we have an uphill task, to say the least, a big challenge ahead. Thank you, chairs. Thank you, B. Thank you, COP presidency. UNEP and Cool Coalition for inviting me. It's great to be here. On behalf of class, I'm very, very pleased to say that we greatly welcome the initiative around the pledge. What struck us most was the comprehensiveness of the pledge. Clearly, there is a recognition for the expected and anticipated growth in cooling needs and the resulting energy demand and the pressures that it will create on emissions growth as well. But at the same time, it's cast very much in human-centric terms. The fact that there is a talk about access to cooling, that it is about impacts on livelihoods, it is risks to poor and vulnerable communities. And these are recognized and balanced, I think, in a fair way in terms of what it wants to do. And this is where I feel the leadership, India, and the COP presidency is demonstrating on this issue is particularly important. As a civil society partner to BE on the policy making process, we know that the policies making process in India integrates some of these questions about how to ensure that the poor and vulnerable are not left behind. And I think this is something we can carry forward from these lessons and to make it more globally accessible. The other part that I would comment on is the question that the chairs asked in terms of how do we then operationalize this pledge. And I want to pick up basically on what the DG BE mentioned in his opening remarks, is saying that this is one area where international collaboration and cooperation will be very, very effective. I think there is an opportunity to create stronger roles for harmonized, standardized approaches to doing these policies. In the questions that are asked, which are the critical goals, financing policies, etc. Policy is clearly one of the key critical starting points. Unless you have that, you can't get anything else. And I think international collaboration that can build platforms and ability to access best practices and policies, standards, I think would be excellent. The second thing that these kind of collaboration could do is to ensure that it's not just about the policy as alone, but the larger framework in terms of the enabling infrastructure around testing infrastructure, surveillance, etc., that can also be borrowed from best practices. And this is where I think international collaboration would be very critical. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bisal. Thank you so much to all of you. I mean, so much expertise and experience that lies, and we will definitely hear much more from all of you. Thank you so very much for joining us and giving your all those thought-provoking ideas, and we'll be in touch. Thank you. Maybe now we will invite the next round of experts. So I'll hand it over to you, Pravatnan.
Thank you all the panelists for the first round of discussion. Now I would like to request the panelists for the second round of discussion. Okay, the first panelist is Mr. Sudhir Pilla, Country Head, Tabrid. Please join on the dais. Second panelist, Miss Aneli Sturge. Sorry if I am badly pronouncing your name. The Program Manager, District Cooling from GIZ. Miss Koel Mandal from Shakti Foundation. Are you here? Miss Koel? She is not here. Mr. Tarun Garg, RMI India Foundation. Mr. Kawaljit Singh Java, President of Rama. I think he is also not here. So we are okay. Another panelist is Mr. Abhiyant from NRDC. Mr. Abhiyant. So I welcome all the panelists for the second round of discussion. As you already heard that we have a discussion what is the role of the industries as well as your role in achieving the cooling the cooling intervention to achieve the cooling demand, as well as how to reduce the cooling demand in the next 2 decades. So without wasting time, as we are running shortage of time, so I would like to request Mr. Sudhir to share your experience, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us here. Just a quick introduction first. I mean, we are a cooling utility. We are the largest cooling utility in the world. And we either provide cooling as a service at a building level, or campus cooling for a set of buildings, or of course district cooling like some of you spoke about to a larger section of the city. We are the largest cooling utility in the world, and basically by aggregating cooling demand and then providing it in a more systematic way, it significantly reduce cooling consumption as a whole, right? And we've heard cases of district cooling basically being far more energy efficient. I think in large parts, having a pledge itself is a great step in this direction. So I mean, moving towards a cool COP and a cool COP is a great first step in this direction. But the way we're seeing it is basically, I think some of the conversation on whether we can make behavioral changes or even technological improvements or even coming out with standards and so on is one part of it. But I mean, beyond behavioral, we are at a standpoint right now where we know cooling demand is growing rapidly, right? For the global south, including India, it's no longer the point where basically it can be just through behavioral changes or even through smaller technology interventions. At some level, there needs to be a bit more of interlinkages between the overall energy transition. And what I mean by that is basically the focus should just be twofold in some ways, basically between either moving towards far better, more efficient buildings and more passive cooling solutions, or aggregating demand as much as possible at scale through district cooling. And once aggregation happens, then the interlinkages with other aspects of the energy transition become more evident, because I mean, you start seeing possibilities of basically combining this with whether it's the gas story, whether it's basically the waste story, or whether it is even energy power transmission and distribution as well. It gives up a lot of possibility through having district cooling to have integrated urban energy systems. And I think the more and more we don't look at cooling in isolation, but look at this as an absolute essential cohesive link within the overall energy transition. The greater would be the ability to actually solve multiple challenges beyond just the need for cooling alone, right? And that's what I think probably is not coming out too clearly from the pledge, but I think it's a step in the right direction. On some of the focus areas, I think as a private sector player, what we've already done is with IFC, which is a developer institution, we've set up the largest cooling as a service investment platform already for Asia, where we want to invest in cooling as a service. And I think, of course, more than policy is one part, but more and more is required on market enablement and creating the right environment for whatever is already there right now in the market to essentially be adopted at a larger scale. Okay, time up.
Thank you, Mr. Sudhi. I completely agree with your point that yes, the future is the district cooling, so we should focus more on this. So now I would like to request Ms. Aneli to have your views.
Thank you so much. And yes, I can completely agree with what has been said before, so I'm trying not to repeat myself. But yes, with this year's COP at UAE and the G20 presidency of India, we have put a spotlight on cooling that is much needed, because cooling is no longer a luxury product for many, but it is a necessity, and it's no longer cooling, it's about thermal comfort. So the German Technical Development Corporation is very happy to be supporting the government of India in the implementation of the Cooling Action Plan, specifically on energy efficient district cooling. So we have been part of the team that had the pleasure to host you at Gift City yesterday, and to be able to show you what can be possible with an energy efficient district cooling system. So to accelerate the energy transition and offer cooling to as many people as possible, a lot of factors need to come together, right? We need to have a legal framework. We need to have some cooling guidelines in place. We need to have the skilled people, the engineers that can install the technologies. We need to have an engaged private sector that is willing to work on the topic and push it forward. We need to have an informed civil society that knows about the benefits of energy efficient cooling systems and is able to demand this from the industry. And then, of course, we need to have a massive acceleration of renewable energy available. Because if we can have a district cooling system where we can cool down the water that is needed to cool the buildings by using renewable energies at a time when they are readily available, and then we can store that cold water, and then we use this cool water to cool down the building when there's the demand for it, we can lower the peak demand, not only in India, but globally. And this is what is needed right now for many countries.
Thank you so much. Yes, international cooperation is actually the need of the hour, and without this, the interventions actually cannot be taken off in each country. So I completely agree with you. The next panelist is Mr. Tarun Garg.
Hello, is it audible? Yeah. Hi, I'm Tarun Garg from RMI. Just a quick intro. RMI is a think, do, and scale tank, and RMI commissioned the Global Cooling Prize along with various partners who are also part of this workshop. I think from our perspective, I personally feel, and after working in this sector for almost a decade, it's really time for us to implement things on the ground. And there are 3 initiatives where RMI is working right now. And one of those initiatives is with UNEP. We are working on a program called as Urban Cooling Program in Chennai, where we are looking at implementation of solutions like cool roof, super efficient ceiling fan, room air conditioners, nature-based solution, urban heat island mapping. I think one of the common thematic area across all these 5 solutions is definitely engagement with the government, state government, but as well as we also need support from the industry, support from developers, and support from consumers as well. Otherwise, I don't think we would want a situation where policies are being developed, but that remains on the paper without its implementation. So that's one of the initiatives we are working on. Second initiative, which is completely industry focused. Right now, we are working with Lodha, largest real estate group in India. And the objective is how we can decarbonize, first of all, the portfolio of Lodha, but definitely thinking about the country as well. So right now, we have started our work on various various streams across cooling, looking at passive design, looking at urban cooling, looking at super efficient appliances. But again, the implementation side of things are not easy. I can tell you, if you have to implement a super efficient ceiling fan, which looks very simple, whenever we talk about super efficient ceiling fan, people always say, just replace it. It's not easy. It's not easy. There are so many things that we generally tend to ignore. Just an example, the cost of regulator in a ceiling fan is almost 10% of the total cost of super efficient ceiling fan. Then there are so many models, so many varieties. It's not easy when you're thinking about implementation. So that's the other instance which I want to highlight. And the third initiative which we are going to start with Niti Aayog is more about how can we establish a net zero cooling collaborative, which is really about a platform where you will bring industry and consumers together, actually. The intent of this platform is to, first of all, bridge the knowledge gap that exists between industry and the consumers, as well as provide a lot of resources so that, industry and consumers come on a single platform. And industry, I mean, not only the manufacturers, but financial institutions, consumers, all the OEMs. So these are the 3 initiatives. I feel, the work Cool Coalition is doing in India and in Global South, I think the work we are doing here will definitely kind of collaborate and share the learnings with a larger audience.
Thank you, Mr. Tarun, to point out the importance of ground level implementation and various challenges actually we face while implementing at the ground level. That is most important, whether we are coming up with policies, but if ground level implementation is not there, then the real outcome will not be there. So thank you so much for your inputs. Now I'm coming to Mr. Abhiyant from NRDC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. First of all, let me thank BE, Ministry of Power, and Cool Coalition for setting up this stage, which is the need of the hour since we are already into the summer and there can't be a better time to discuss on the agenda of cooling. So I work for NRDC India, which is India's branch of the Natural Resources Defense Council, US. We work on environment, climate change, public health from an overarching agenda of equity in advancing, evidence-based policies and research. In India, we started on working in the sector of cooling from the heat action plans perspective. So if you know anything about heat action plan in India, NRDC was among the pioneer institutions, organizations that started working with the local in fact, in Gujarat itself, Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation and other knowledge institutions, and built the first South Asian heat action plant, which initially didn't have the component of cool roofs. But we eventually added the component of cool roof as a long-term, not just adaptation, but also a mitigation measure, and also keeping the thermal comfort and, equity in focus. Because when we talk about the most vulnerable and marginalized communities, they may not afford access to fans and air conditionings, but cheap, low cost, energy efficient mechanisms like cool roof, passive cooling mechanisms like cool roof can work still better for them. So that's how we started working on cool roof programs, and from piloting cool roof programs in cities like Ahmedabad and other cities, to scaling it to a state level policy. So while we are today sitting here discussing about the global cooling pledge, Telangana, with the help of ASCII and NRDC India, the minister already launched the first statewide cool roof policy there. So if you might want to go ahead and take a look, the target is by 2028 there will be 300 square kilometer cool roofs that will be painted as cool roofs or will be equipped with the passive cooling mechanisms. So those are the kind of support, technical and evidence-based support that NRDC provides. What we were just talking about, that there need to be a hand-holding, and we are happy to support Cool Coalition and other partners in making the pledge a more implementable one, rather than just with targets and numbers only. So yeah, happy to be here, and I won't take much of time because I know everyone must be waiting for the lunch. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Abhiyan, for pointing out the low-cost technologies that are actually the need of the hour, and this is one of the recommendation on the India Cooling Action Plan. So we should also focus on the availability of the low-cost technologies like cool roof. So thank you so much, all the panelists, for your valuable time and your inputs. So before leaving the dais, I would like to emphasize that one of our panelists actually pointed out that consumer behavior is very much important in the cooling intervention, in the successful implementation of various cooling intervention, and it is actually correct. So at BE, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, we are taking various consumer behavior activities like awareness program on energy efficiency appliances on various social media, then radio program, and also retailer training program. We are giving trainings to the retailers. So all these activities we are taking towards the consumer behavior, and it is one of the important aspects. So thank you so much, all the panelists and my co-moderator. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you very much, chairs. Thank you, Dr. Mohanty. Thank you, Ms. Samal. Ladies and gentlemen, it was an honor to have you all distinguished dignitaries with us today. I thank all the panelists of the side event. I am Dr. Rekha Mukherjee, signing off from this meeting today. And on this note, I hand over the podium to Ms. Lily Riahi for the closing formalities.
Colleagues and distinguished guests, I will not keep you from lunch much longer. I'll just give a few key points on behalf of also DG Abu Bakr, who had to excuse himself to go to the energy efficiency discussion happening at the Energy Transition Working Group right now. I think one thing I want to mention is we've heard many inputs today, and these inputs will not be lost. So the next steps will be that the inputs from all of the discussions today will be captured in an outcome document. And this outcome document will be presented to at the G20 Ministerial in Goa. So your inputs will be are very important in shaping the discussions on cooling within the G20 and towards COP28, and I wanted to reiterate that they will be captured in the outcome document. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I think there's definitely agreement amongst in the government of India and also with the various partners here today that will work together globally with the international cooperation partners to take this effort forward on cooling and the global cooling actions and pledge. It's also an important topic for discussion within the G20, in particularly in the energy efficiency roadmap, and will be highlighted as such as a key area to achieve the doubling of energy efficiency target with the SDGs. And so I think with that, I would like to just thank everybody for joining us and for staying with us until the end of the meetings, for giving such important and insightful comments to shape and take forward the pledge, and also to shape and help us make meaningful impact at COP28 and within the G20 discussions, and that we will be continuing to be in touch to work together with you to take these actions forward. So with that, I'll close the meeting. Thank you very much.